Pennywise has once again become the center of attention, and it's quite clear that this scary clown is going to remain there for a while now that we're getting a chance to witness the history of Derry, Pennywise himself. Over the years, various Stephen King adaptations have been brought to life, but none have had the same pop culture impact as his clown creation. I mean, we haven't gotten our Dark Tower world yet, so that means Pennywise will remain the peak of King's horror island for now. But did you know that King had some truly bizarre influences on his horror masterpieces? And there are some unsettling connections between his clown real-world events. Let's delve into the real-life crimes that inspired one of the most terrifying characters in Stephen King's literature. Before we get into this explanation, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Pennywise, a Stephen King nightmare for children. Pennywise, the dancing clown, has managed to curate nightmares for a whole new generation with the 2017 film, and that trend will probably continue given the plans for the It franchise. The Stephen King creation has now permeated a wide range of his work and haunts other characters and genres as well. Remember that time Jake Epping almost went into a chimney with Pennywise, but held back right when he realized it was something he shouldn't touch? He called it everything that was wrong with Derry, and in a way, Pennywise could be considered to be everything that's wrong with Derry and more. That's because he's no ordinary evil. He goes beyond the idea of evil and haunts you for a long time. We did get to see him embarking on proper adventures with the Losers Club, and he haunted them for years. However, this is an alien creature that's been on the planet for a considerable time, only appears every 27 years to haunt children by taking on their worst fears. It arrived on Earth millions of years ago, and there's no particular form that the creature has that could be called its true form, except for the female spider's body, the form that the Losers Club witnessed down in the sewers. But eventually, the creature discovered that clowns can generate fear upon coming across a clown act at a fair around the 1800s. Ever since, it took on the form of Pennywise and continued to haunt the people of Derry, with some being bothered by a stray clown, while others were tormented to death by their worst fears. Even though clowns have become a common trope in horror, King has often been inspired by real events and managed to twist them into his own terrifying creations. Yes, Cujo was based on a Saint Bernard that growled at him enough to make him feel as though it was going to tear him apart. Even Carrie is based on a real girl, and elements of supernatural rumors are in the locker room talks. So yeah, the next time you think about bothering King with something, remember you could end up being some terrifying creation in his next piece of work. It makes you wonder about what happened between the real Annie Wilkes and King. He says it was drugs, but probably never know. Let's take a look at what led to the creation of one of the most terrifying creatures King has ever made, which has proven his twisted mind over and over again. Derry is Bangor. You can't talk about Pennywise without talking about Derry, the place that's been the home to some of the biggest events taking place in King's works. Now, when filming for the It adaptations occurs, the shooting takes place in different locations. Even the latest one was shot in Oshawa, Ontario. However, that doesn't change the fact that Derry is very much based on the place where King moved in 1979, around the time he was working on his ultimate creation. Bangor is a place that's quite close to King and his family, considering his wife Tabitha fell in love with the Victorian houses there, as well as the nearby schools, for just a short walking distance away for their kids. But those weren't the only reasons that King drew inspiration from this town and decided to move in. It was also because Bangor had stories. King was someone who excelled at taking these stories and twisting them for his own work. The way that King describes Derry in his works, it almost feels like you can see the place with your own eyes, and somehow, the darkness of the town is always right around the corner. One of the most iconic and shocking moments from It is when Pennywise kills Georgie as he enters the storm drain where his boat disappeared. If you go to the corner of Union and Jackson in Bangor, Maine, you might just discover that same storm drain. But it's entirely up to you if you really want to go and check that storm drain out. Even larger is the reference to the sewer system beneath the streets, which plays an essential role in the story as it serves as the secret lair of Pennywise. According to King, somebody told me apparently you can put a canoe down in the sewers just over across from here at the Westgate Mall and come out by the Mount Hope Cemetery at the other end of town. This same guy told me that the Bangor sewer system was built during the WPA. They lost track of what they were building under. They had money from the federal government for sewers, so they built like crazy. A lot of the blueprints have now been lost, and it's easy to get lost down there. I decided I wanted to put all that into a book, and eventually I did. Bangor became Derry. So yeah, Bangor became Derry, and eventually it became home to some of the greatest horror ever created. But then there's the Paul Bunyan statue that ended up chasing Richie Tozier down the street during another breathtaking moment from It. There's one of these statues in Bangor, and it's the only man-made feature that stands at around 30 feet right on the main street in front of the Cross Insurance Center. Paul Bunyan is a lumber legend, and the statue was built in 1959 as a tribute to the town's connection with the lumber industry. However, over the years, various complaints have been made about the statue being too creepy. King took that fear and poured it in creating one of those iconic Pennywise moments. But wait until you hear about the story behind the creation, Pennywise himself. The killer clown that King would disagree. King has always been very clear about his creations, and that's how he managed to craft this horror icon that stood the test of time. According to him, I had an idea when I was in Colorado that I wanted to write a really long book that had all of the monsters in it. I figured if people think I'm a horror writer, I never considered myself to be that myself, I'm just a writer. I thought to myself, I'll get all of the monsters together as I possibly can. I'll get the vampire, I'll get the werewolf, I'll even get the mummy. The mummy has never really scared me because it's like the mummy is after us, let's all walk. It's not a terribly scary monster, but he had to be there because he's one of the classics. But then I thought to myself, there ought to be one binding, horrible, nasty, gross creature kind of thing that you don't want to see, and it makes you scream just to see it. I thought to myself, what scares children more than anything else in them? And the answer was clowns. So I created Pennywise the Clown. Then what happened was ABC came along and said they wanted to make a mini-series out of it and wanted to cast Tim Curry as Pennywise. I thought it was a strange idea, but it really worked, and it scared a whole generation of young people and made them scared of clowns. But clowns are scary for children to start with. But the creature wasn't always a clown, as the lore indicates that it managed to sneak into Bob Gray's circus train. Bob Gray was the original Pennywise, and he used to travel with his circus, accompanied by his daughter Kirsch, until he was killed. It took on his identity. Though there's no indication about what happened to Kirsch, we know what Pennywise ended up doing. Now, King has been very clear about his origins for the character of Pennywise, saying that he drew inspiration from the famous fairy tale of the Three Billy Goats Gruff, about a troll that haunts the underside of a bridge, something that's very commonly used as a story to spook kids. But even if King won't agree with it entirely, there's a chance that there might have been a stronger source of inspiration from events that transpired before King started working on the novel. About 8 years before King wrote It, a man by the name of John Wayne Gacy was convicted of numerous crimes, primarily targeting children. What makes this entire ordeal even more unsettling is the fact that Gacy was a performer himself who would take on the clown attire, going by the names Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown, and approach children to carry out his heinous acts. By the time he was caught, he was responsible for a total of 33 murders, along with multiple cases of sexual assault. He would lure his victims to his home, trick them into putting on handcuffs, and then sexually torture them, and finally, murder them by strangulation. After all that, he would dump the bodies into the river or store them in his crawl space. Some of these bodies were even found buried on his land. Gacy managed to instill fear into the minds of the public, and Pennywise would eventually borrow that fear shortly. Both of them have a rather eerily similar vibe, and they've managed to remain strong figures in pop culture, so it's not surprising if this individual influenced King in his writing. Even after the creation of Pennywise, there have been reports of clowns or entities similar to them being the source of terror in a community. King has been quite clear about never mentioning Gacy as a source of influence, but that makes absolute sense considering the bizarre case that crime has become over the years. That time, King met the beloved clown from McDonaldland. Even though King has been quite clear about the lack of any connection between Pennywise and John Wayne Gacy, the same can't be said for our old pal Ronald McDonald. We know it's a rather bizarre turn of events, but there's a crazier impact that we'll discuss later. Meanwhile, let's go into this particular anecdote that King shared about his interaction with the clown. The author said, "I was on a book tour and I was on my way home. The plane started to pull away from the gate and then it pulls back in. The door opens again and Ronald McDonald gets on on the airplane. He's fully dressed and sits down next to me because I attract weirdness. I'm a weirdness magnet. Here he has orange hair, orange shoes, the whole 9 yards. He sits down next to me. This is years ago. Plane takes off, no smoking light goes off, pulls out a pack of Kents, lights it up, and orders a gin and tonic from the stewardess. I said the only thing I could think of. Where did you come from? He says McDonaldland, which is a real place in Chicago. King had mentioned that the clown didn't spook him, but we know that Pennywise looks awfully similar to Ronald McDonald. From Bangor to fiction, the Charlie Howard illusion. Remember when we said that Bangor had some events that had a massive influence on King and how his idea of Derry came to be? Well, there's the case of Charlie Howard, which became a matter of major concern and remembrance in Maine. Right after King had moved into Bangor in 1984, Charlie Howard, a 23-year-old native of Portsmouth who had just moved into town, was killed by 3 teenagers. Back then, the church at Bangor was one of the few places where people could open up about their sexuality, and he was a member of the church himself and was amongst the others in the church who felt safe from being targeted due to their sexuality. On the evening of July 7th, Howard was returning from a potluck supper at the church around 10:30 p.m. with his friend Roy Ogden. He came across the 3 young men, Daniel Ness, Sean Mabry, and James Francis Baines, who had spent their day drinking and were going around crashing parties. They saw Howard and his friend and started an argument, which soon escalated into something physical that eventually led to Howard falling. 3 of them picked him up and threw him over the bridge railing into the Kunduskeg stream. It was a 15-foot drop. Howard continued to shove for help as he couldn't swim. 3 teens drove away in their car while Ogden ran and pulled a nearby fire alarm. Howard's body was discovered the next day, the autopsy determining that it was caused by drowning and acute asthma was a major contributing factor. The 3 boys were arrested on the same day, and during their statement, they mentioned that they just wanted to beat up a and that led to the death of Charlie Howard. The case of Charlie Howard was a tragedy, and it became a major aspect of how the town looked at the LGBTQ community because the response around this case was mostly seen as muted, and over the years, people have been made to feel guilty about not speaking up when it was time to do so. On that night, about 200 people participated in a vigil. A memorial service was held at the church as they marched to the State Street Bridge. They tossed flowers into the water and said the words, "This is for you, Charlie." And ever since then, that act has been repeated on every year on July 7th, remembered as Tolerance Day, in honor of Charlie Howard's memory. This event moved, and he mentioned in one of his interviews, "At the time I started writing it, the Howard murder had just happened. It was fresh in my mind and fitted my idea of Derry as a place where terrible things happen. And maybe, needless to say, I was outraged. It was a hate crime. I don't feel responsible exactly, and I'd never lay that on the community, but it's our town. We live here, which means we have to live with Charlie and continue trying to make it right." In his novel, a gay man named Adrian Mellon is attacked by bigoted teens. According to them, there is no particular reason for their attack other than his sexuality. Now, they tossed him over the bridge after beating him up. The man manages to survive this attack. It was later that he came upon Pennywise, who was present there to finish him off. The inspiration is quite clear. King was explicit that he had to mention this evil in his book so that it also becomes an essential part of his fictional version of Bangor.
Fear.
After Pennywise, the nightmare returns. One would imagine that the movies and other inspirations are quite enough in describing the true circumstances that led to the creation of Pennywise. However, it doesn't end there, as Pennywise himself has become a source of mass hysteria with multiple clown sightings over the years. This phenomenon saw a resurgence following the release of the 2017 remake. Some wondered if this was a marketing strategy, while others linked it with the release of the Rob Zombie film 31. But it became truly creepy when kids started reporting cases of clowns luring them places, something that had managed to make things worse. In fact, it became so bad that our beloved clown from McDonaldland was phased out of McDonald's marketing. So yeah, in a way, Ronald McDonald was actually killed by Pennywise, as the killer clown managed to bring back memories of everything that was feared about clowns. Finally, King had to clarify his position on this entire scenario and ask people to take the matter lightly, spreading cheer instead of fear. So says the King of Horror. Marvelous verdict! I remember watching Tim Curry's Pennywise, and it somehow became a lot creepier than I had expected from reading it. In fact, it was the reason that likely led other people to use clowns as a means of generating fear, even though the Joker also had a hand in doing so. But Joker couldn't shapeshift, and hopefully didn't primarily target kids as a means of getting to his enemy. Pennywise was something that couldn't be understood, while the smile on the face can scare your soul to sleep. That's all we got for you this time, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.